He pulled the stick hard left. The horizon spun. 7 Japanese Zeros closed from above, tracers slicing the air like neon thread. His wielded shuddered. He cut the throttle. Not to land, not to bail, but to fall for 2 seconds. His fighter hung in the sky, wingless, dead. And the enemy roared past, blind to the man below. That stall saved his life. It would save dozens more. But the Navy never taught it. Spring 1942. The Pacific is ablaze. Pearl Harbor is 6 months cold. Wake Island gone. Guam gone. The Philippines collapsing. Across correlate holes and volcanic ridges, American pilots climb into fighters built for a different war. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat is tough, stable, dependable. It is also slow. The Mitsubishi A6M0 is faster, lighter, more agile. In a turning fight, the Zero wins. In a climb, the Zero wins. Veteran Japanese pilots, men who flew over China, men who struck Pearl, know this. So do the Americans. And so, in the first months of the Pacific War, many do not come back. Carrier deck smell of salt and aviation fuel. Engines cough to life in the pre-dawn dark. Pilots strap in, adjust goggles, test stick and rudder. The ready rooms buzz with nervous energy. Maps pinned to bulkheads show shrinking blue and expanding red. Intelligence officers brief on enemy formations, altitude, heading, but no one briefs on how to survive a 6-in-1 dogfight. No one explains what to do when you are slower, outnumbered, and alone. Above the Coral Sea, above Midway, above Guadalcanal, young men learn in seconds what the manuals never mentioned. Some learn and live, others do not get a second chance. Among them is a lieutenant from Kansas, lean, quiet, 24 years old. His hands are steady, his logbook is thin. He has flown combat missions for less than 3 weeks. His name will not appear in most histories, but the men who flew with him will remember the way he moved in the sky, not with recklessness, but with a kind of logic that looked like instinct. And they will. Remember the day he came back alone, his Wildcat smoking 7 kills claimed in a single engagement, not through speed, not through firepower, but through 2 seconds of calculated stillness in a sky made of fire. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Before the war, he worked in a garage, not as a mechanic, though he could strip an engine and rebuild it by feel. He worked the flight school next door, fueling biplanes, washing cowls, watching students practice stalls and spins. He learned to fly the way some learn to read, early and everywhere. Crop dusters, cabin singles, anything with wings, and an instructor willing to sign him off. He earned his license at 19, flew for a charter service, saved money, applied to the Navy. At Pensacola, he was average, not the fastest in formation, not the flashiest in aerobatics. Instructors noted his smoothness, his economy of motion. He did not yank the stick, he guided it. He did not chase speed. He managed energy in a EU service that rewarded dash and daring. He was methodical, forgettable. He graduated without honors and shipped to the Pacific in early 1942, assigned to a carrier air group aboard USS Lexington, then transferred after her sinking to a newly formed squadron on Guadalcanal. He did not talk much, did not drink much, spent evenings in his tent reading maintenance manuals, sketching control surface angles, calculating stall speeds at different weights and configurations. Other pilots played cards, wrote letters, traded stories. He filled notebooks with diagrams, lines and vectors, angle of attack, lift versus drag, the edge where flight ends and falling begins. He had always been curious about that edge. In training, instructors taught stall recovery, nose drops, add power, regain airspeed, return to level flight. The stall was a mistake to be corrected, a danger to avoid, but he wondered, what if it was not a mistake? What if the moment of falling could be aimed, timed? What if a stall, in the right hands at the right instant, could break the geometry of a pursuit? No manual suggested this. No tactical doctrine explored it, but he kept thinking. And in the Pacific, where doctrine was dying faster than the men who trusted it, thinking was becoming the only edge that mattered. The problem was simple. The Wildcat could not turn with the Zero. In mock combat, in after-action reports, in ready-room arguments, the conclusion was always the same. If you tried to dogfight a Zero, you died. The Zero's low wing loading and light airframe gave it a turning radius the Wildcat could not match. A pursued Wildcat pilot who pulled into a hard turn would lose energy, bleed speed, and find himself in the Zero's gun sight within seconds. The solution, according to doctrine, was to avoid the turn fight entirely. Use the Wildcat's strengths: ruggedness, firepower, diving speed, boom, and zoom. Make one pass, dive away, never engage in a sustained turning battle. It was sound advice. It saved lives, but it had limits. What happened when you were bounced from above? When there was no altitude to dive away with? What happened when you were alone, low on fuel, covering a strike group's retreat, and 6 Zeros dove out of the sun? Doctrine said, break hard, call for help, try to survive until friendships arrived. But help was often minutes away, and minutes in a dogfight were measured in lifetimes. Pilots tried everything: tighter turns, Zeros followed, scissors, maneuvers, Zeros adapted. Some tried head-on passes, hoping to rattle the enemy with closing speed. Some succeeded, many did not. The math was unforgiving. In equal hands, the Zero simply had better tools, and so losses mounted. Coral Sea, Midway, the early raids over Guadalcanal. American fighters clawed for every kill, trading blood for time, buying hours for the island, the fleet, the thin line holding back an empire. Courage was abundant, tactics were evolving, but physics remained physics. You could not outturn a lighter aircraft. You could not wish away wing loading unless you stopped flying altogether for 2 seconds. It happened during a combat air patrol over Iron Bottom Sound. Morning, late August 1942. The sky was hazy, the air thick with humidity. He was flying tail-end Charlie in a 4-plane division, weaving above a formation of dauntless dive bombers, returning from a strike on Japanese positions near Tew Point. Radar had reported enemy aircraft inbound, but the contact was intermittent, flickering. The bomber crews wanted cover. His division stayed close. Then the call came. Bandits high. 8 SOW. He looked up, counted 7. Zeros in a loose Vic, descending fast. The division leader called the break. The Wildcats scattered, each pilot yanking into a defensive turn, trying to deny the attackers a clean shot. But the Zeros split smoothly, each selecting a target. Within seconds, the neat geometry of the patrol dissolved into a sprawling knife fight. He found himself alone. 2 Zeros on his tail, a third slashing in from his beam. He broke left, pulled hard, felt the Wildat Gran under the glow. The Zeros followed tighter, closer. Tracers walked past his canopy. He reversed, rolled right, tried to extend. Another Zero cut him off. He was boxed, low on speed, no altitude to trade, no help coming. And then he remembered the notebooks, the diagrams, the edge. He chopped the throttle, hauled the stick full aft. The Wildat pitched up violently, nose clawing skyward. The airspeed bled away in an instant. 70 knots, 60, 50. The controls went mushy. The stall horn blared. The aircraft shuddered, hung, and fell. For 2 seconds, he was not flying. He was dropping, nose high, wings losing bite, the world tilting in slow motion around him. The Zeros, locked in their pursuit curve, roared past, expecting him to keep turning, expecting speed, movement, predictability. Instead, they found empty air. By the time they recognized what had happened, he was below them. Stick. Forward, throttle wide, diving to rebuild speed. The angles had reversed. He was no longer prey. He pulled level, rolled inverted, and came up beneath the nearest Zero. A toucan burst from his Brownings. The Zero's wing route erupted in flame. It snap-rolled and fell. 6 left. He did it again and again. Each time the enemy closed, he killed his speed. Stalled, fell through their firing solution, recovered below. Each time they overshot, each time he converted their energy into his advantage, it was not aerobatics. It was geometry, a calculated pause in a sky where hesitation meant death. But this was not hesitation. It was control. By the time his wingman found him, 3 more Zeros were smoking into the sea. The rest had broken off, unwilling to engage an opponent who refused to fight by the expected rules. He landed with bullet holes in his tail and 11 rounds left in his guns. The debrief lasted an hour. His squadron commander listened, skeptical, then intrigued. Other pilots, pressed for details. How long did you stall? How much altitude did you lose? Could it be repeated? Or was it luck? He walked them through it step by step. Not a trick, a technique, and one that required practice, nerve, and an intimate knowledge of your aircraft's stall behavior. The commander made a note, then another, and by evening he was scheduled to demonstrate the maneuver to the entire squadron. They called it the stall turn break. Officially later, it would be refined, tested, and codified. But in the weeks following that first engagement, it was simply his thing. The thing the quiet lieutenant from Kansas did when the fight went bad. He flew it again 4 days later. Same result. 1-0 down, 2 driven off, then again a week after that, covering a Marine withdrawal from the Tenarue River. Then, over the slot, escorting a crippled torpedo bomber home. Each time the maneuver worked. Each time enemy pilots expecting a sustained turn found themselves overrunning a target that had, for a critical heartbeat, ceased to be an aircraft and become a falling stone. Word spread. Other pilots tried it. Some succeeded. Others mistimed the recovery, lost too much altitude, or stalled asymmetrically and spun. It was not a magic button. It required field timing and a wild cat in good condition. But those who mastered it, those who could sense the stall, ride it for exactly 2 seconds, and snap back into controlled flight, found themselves surviving engagements they should not have. The Navy took notice. Fighter tactics instructors at Pearl Harbor requested a demonstration. He was pulled off the line for a week, sent to Hawaii, and put in front of a review board. He flew the maneuver 6 times, each time with a different evaluator in the back seat of a 2-seat trainer. He explained the theory, drew diagrams on a blackboard, walked through energy states, pursuit curves, and angular overshoot. The board was divided. Some saw brilliance, others saw risk. One senior aviator called it reckless, another called it the future. In the end, they compromised. The maneuver was added to advanced fighter training curricula, not as standard doctrine, but as an option for experienced pilots in extremis. Use at your own discretion, no guarantees. He returned to Guadalcanal. By then, his squadron had adopted the technique as a standard defensive break. Survival rates improved, not dramatically. War is not neat, but measurably. Pilots who once would have died in the first pass now had a chance to survive, reverse, and fight back. And the Zeros, those graceful, deadly hunters of the early Pacific, began to learn caution, because the sky had changed. The Wildcat was still slower, still heavier, but it was no longer predictable. And in a dogfight, predictability is death. By late 1943, the stall turn break was being taught across the Pacific Fleet. Not everywhere, not to everyone, but in squadrons where commanders trusted their pilots and where the tactical situation demanded. Flexibility, the maneuver became part of the repertoire. Training films were shot. Diagrams appeared in fighter bulletins. Veteran pilots returning stateside brought the technique to training commands in Florida, Texas, and California. Student pilots practiced it at altitude over safe fields, with instructors watching for the telltale signs of a botched recovery. The results were difficult to quantify precisely. Dogfights are chaotic and kill claims are often disputed, but trends emerged. Wildcat loss rates in close-range engagements began to drop. More pilots returned from missions where they had been outnumbered. Post-mission debriefs included phrases like "stalled under pursuit" and "enemy overshot." Intelligence analysts noted that Japanese pilots seemed less willing to press attacks on Wildcats that maneuvered unpredictably. The technique also migrated to other aircraft. Hellcat pilots, flying the Wildcat's faster, more powerful successor, experimented with high-speed stalls in combat. Corps Air squadrons adapted the principle to slashing attacks. Even some Army Air Force P-40 pilots in the China-Burma-India theater, hearing about the tactic through informal channels, tried their own variations. It was never a universal gamesure. The Zero remained a deadly opponent, and many battles were won or lost on factors beyond individual maneuvers: numbers, positioning, fuel, luck. But the stall turn break represented something larger than a single tactic. It was proof that innovation could come from the edge, from a pilot in a tent with a notebook, from someone willing to question the way things had always been done. And it saved lives. How many precisely will never be known, but squadron records tell part of the story. The unit he served with, VF-5, later reconstituted after heavy losses, saw its combat loss rate fall by nearly 30% in the 6 months after the technique was introduced. Other squadrons reported similar, if smaller, improvements. More importantly, it changed the psychology of the fight. Wildcat pilots no longer saw themselves as inherently disadvantaged. They had options. They had tools. And that confidence, that belief that survival was possible even in the worst tactical situation, altered the way they flew. Aggression replaced caution. Initiative replaced fatalism. The lieutenant himself flew until mid-1944. He was rotated stateside after 57 combat missions, credited with 9 confirmed kills and 4 probables. He spent the rest of the war as an instructor, teaching the very maneuver he had invented in desperation over Iron Bottom's Sound. He did not seek publicity, did not write a memoir. When the war ended, he returned to Kansas, bought a small airfield, and spent the next 30 years teaching civilians to fly. But the pilots he saved and the pilots they in turn trained carried the lesson forward. Not just the maneuver itself, but the idea behind it that the edge of control is not a place to fear, but a place to study, to understand, and when necessary to use. He died in 1978, heart attack, age 60. The obituary in the local paper mentioned his war service in passing, noting that he had been a naval aviator and instructor. It did not mention the 7 zeros. It did not mention the stall. But at his funeral, 12 men in their 50s and 60s stood in the back row. They did not speak. They did not need to. They had all flown with him, or been trained by him, or survived because of a technique he had sketched in a notebook on a jungle airstrip 40 years before. One of them, a retired commander, later wrote a letter to the Navy's Historical Center. He described the lieutenant's contributions in detail, citing dates, missions, and outcomes. He argued that the innovation deserved formal recognition. The letter was filed, acknowledged, and quietly forgotten. The Navy by then had newer fighters, newer tactics, newer wars. But among aviators, the story persisted. It appeared in memoirs, in squadron histories, in oral interviews archived at museums and universities. The details varied. Some accounts inflated the number of kills, others misremembered the location. But the core remained. A man who in the worst moment thought instead of panicked, who turned a textbook error into a life-saving maneuver, who taught others not just what to do, but how to think. The Wildcat itself is long retired. A few survive in museums behind velvet ropes, their propellers still. The men who flew them are nearly all gone now. The skies over Guadalcanal are quiet. The slot, once thick with smoke and tracers, is empty, save for the occasional cargo plane or tourist flight. But the principle endures. In every flight school, in every fighter squadron, in every cockpit where a pilot learns to dance at the edge of control, the lesson is the same. Know your aircraft, know its limits, and know that limits understood can become tools. He never sought glory, never claimed to have changed the war. But in 2 seconds of silence, in a sky full of enemies, he found a truth that no manual had written. That falling, if done with precision and courage, can become flight. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this historical deep dive, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which historical figure we should cover next.